Hey, tonight we're diving into the drugs that make you question everything. They're legal by accident, dangerous by design, and powerful enough to make your Wi-Fi password feel like ancient scripture. People try them, disappear into their own minds. Some make you think you're God. Others just make you piss glitter and cry for your childhood. Either way, welcome to the craziest drugs you've never heard of. You won't want to try them, but part of you kind of will. If you're new here, welcome to the dark side of human chemistry. And if you've been listening for a while, you know we're about to go deep, really deep, into places most people never hear about. Before we start, I'm genuinely curious. Where are you right now? Are you in bed, driving somewhere, doing dishes, walking your dog? Drop a comment and let me know, because knowing where people are when they discover these stories helps me understand who's drawn to the darker corners of human experience. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button, because we explore the uncomfortable truths, the hidden realities, the things that happen in shadows, the experiences that most people never want to acknowledge exist. Now, get comfortable, turn on a fan if you need to, adjust your pillow, settle in, because this is going to be a long, slow, detailed journey through some of the most disturbing pharmaceutical experiments ever conducted on human consciousness. We're going to explore drugs that can split your personality into multiple people, substances that can make you live someone else's memories as your own, compounds that can trap you in time loops, chemicals that can make you forget you're human. You wake up on a cold metal table in what appears to be a research facility in Prague. Your name is Sarah Chun, except it's also subject 247, and also Viktor Kozlov, because right now, in this moment, you are three completely different people sharing the same body, existing in the same confused, terrified mind. This is what it feels like to be under the influence of a drug called MK Ultra 7, street name Multiple, a compound so dangerous that only a handful of underground chemists have ever successfully created it, and most of them suffered permanent psychological damage just from the synthesis process. Multiple doesn't just change how you see the world, it fractures who you are into separate, complete, fully functioning personalities, each with their own memories, their own knowledge, their own emotional responses, their own desperate need to survive. You become a committee of people trying to control one body. Sarah Chin believes she's volunteering for a memory research study at Charles University. She's cooperative, curious, asking questions about the procedure, completely unaware that Viktor Kozlov, who shares her exact same brain, is convinced he's been captured by Western intelligence agencies and is planning his escape. Meanwhile, Subject 247, the third consciousness inhabiting this same mind, thinks she's participating in a clinical trial for experimental medications. She's nervous but compliant, hoping that following the rules will keep her safe, completely oblivious to the other two personalities fighting for control. The drug works by temporarily shutting down the neural networks that maintain your integrated sense of self, the brain regions that normally take all your different thoughts, emotions, memories, and experiences and bind them together into one coherent person. Multiple turns off these integration systems, allowing different aspects of your personality to become independent, autonomous, self-aware. Each personality has access to different subsets of your original memories and knowledge. Sarah remembers her scientific training, her research experience, her academic relationships. Victor has access to survival skills, strategic thinking, paranoid hypervigilance. Subject 247 can recall experiences with medical procedures, pharmaceutical knowledge, patient advocacy training, but they don't recognize these memories as belonging to the same person. To Sarah, Victor's military knowledge feels like foreign information being implanted in her brain. To Victor, Dr. Chin's clinical expertise seems like enemy programming designed to break his resistance. To Subject 247, both sets of memories feel like contamination, proof that her mind is being invaded. You're not actually in a research facility. You're sitting in your apartment in downtown Seattle, on your familiar couch, watching the evening news. But the drug has created such complete sensory hallucinations that your brain has constructed entire alternate realities, complete with consistent physical environments, believable social interactions, logical cause and effect relationships. Sarah experiences a modern laboratory setting, bright fluorescent lighting, white walls, digital monitoring equipment, the hum of ventilation systems, the smell of antiseptic and ozone. She can feel the cushioned examination table beneath her, the weight of monitoring electrodes attached to her skin, the slight chill of air conditioning. Victor perceives a basement interrogation facility, concrete walls, harsh incandescent bulbs, metal furniture, the sound of footsteps in distant corridors, the smell of dampness and fear. He feels restraints around his wrists, the hardness of a wooden chair, the oppressive weight of surveillance. Subject 247 senses a comfortable medical clinic, soft lighting, pastel walls, gentle background music, the rustle of medical staff moving efficiently, the scent of lavender and cleaning products. She experiences the warmth of heated blankets, the softness of a padded gurney, the reassuring presence of caring professionals. 3 completely different physical environments, 3 separate sets of sensory experiences, 3 distinct emotional atmospheres, all generated by the same brain, all experienced simultaneously, all feeling absolutely real to the personality perceiving them. The personalities begin to interact with people who don't exist. Sarah has detailed conversations with Dr. Martinez, her research coordinator, who explains procedures, answers questions, provides informed consent documentation. Victor is questioned by Colonel Morrison, his interrogator, who demonstrates sophisticated knowledge of Soviet intelligence operations. Subject 247 receives care from Nurse Patricia, who monitors her vital signs, adjusts her medication, offers comfort during difficult moments. These imaginary people respond appropriately to each personality's behavior. They have consistent personalities, believable motivations, realistic dialogue. Your brain is generating complex social interactions in real time, creating responses, manufacturing conversations, building relationships with characters that exist only in altered brain chemistry. The 3 personalities start to conflict with each other. Sarah becomes frustrated that Victor's paranoid responses are contaminating her research participation. She wants to cooperate fully, to contribute valuable data, to maintain scientific integrity. Victor interprets Sarah's cooperation as collaboration with enemy agents, evidence that she's been compromised, proof that she can't be trusted. Subject 247 is frightened by both personalities, their aggression, their unpredictability, their apparent willingness to sacrifice her safety for their own goals. She tries to remain neutral, to avoid taking sides, to protect herself from their conflict. The internal argument creates a sensation like having multiple people shouting inside your head, each voice equally loud, equally insistent, equally convinced they're right. Your body remains perfectly still on the couch, but your consciousness has become a war zone where 3 complete human beings fight for control. Each personality develops distinct relationships with their imagined environments. Sarah grows comfortable with the research setting, begins to trust Dr. Martinez, looks forward to contributing to scientific knowledge. Victor establishes a grudging respect for Colonel Morrison's professionalism, engages in philosophical debates about duty and loyalty, plans increasingly sophisticated resistance strategies. Subject 247 becomes attached to Nurse Patricia's kindness, appreciates the medical team's attention, feels safe in the clinical environment, hopes to recover quickly and return to normal life. These relationships feel completely real, as meaningful as any human connection, complete with emotional investment, shared experiences, mutual understanding. But all of these people exist only in your drug-altered consciousness, created by neurochemical changes, sustained by brain activity, as vivid as any dream character. Except you're fully awake, hyper-aware, experiencing each relationship with genuine emotional intensity. Hour 2 brings deeper complications. The boundaries between personalities begin to blur slightly, allowing limited access to each other's memories. But the personalities interpret this as mental invasion, psychological warfare, evidence of mind control techniques. Sarah suddenly finds herself with knowledge of interrogation procedures, survival training, military protocols, information she's never studied, experiences she's never had. She becomes convinced that Victor is somehow implanting thoughts in her mind, contaminating her responses, sabotaging the research. Victor discovers intimate details about Sarah's personal life, her relationships, her fears, her private thoughts, knowledge that violates his sense of operational security. He assumes Dr. Chun is an enemy operative who's been gathering intelligence, building a psychological profile, preparing to exploit his vulnerabilities. Subject 247 gains access to both sets of memories, scientific knowledge and military training, clinical experience and survival skills. The cognitive dissonance terrifies her. She can't understand how she knows things she's never learned, remembers experiences she's never had. She begins to suspect that both personalities are foreign entities, invaders who've taken over her mind. The memory bleeding creates impossible contradictions. You remember both trusting scientists and fearing them, both cooperating with authority and resisting it, both feeling safe in medical settings and threatened by them. All perspectives feel equally valid, equally real, equally yours. Your brain struggles to maintain the logic of each personality's separate reality. Sarah's research facility becomes more detailed, more convincing, complete with background conversations, announcement systems, the bustle of ongoing scientific work. Victor's prison develops more complexity, guard rotations, prisoner interactions, the institutional rhythm of intelligence operations. Subject 247's medical clinic expands to include multiple departments, specialist consultations, therapeutic programs, a complete healthcare environment. Each world grows more elaborate, more believable, more emotionally engaging. Your consciousness has become a master storyteller, creating 3 simultaneous narratives, each internally consistent, each completely separate from the others. The drug's effects intensify during Hour 3. The personalities become more rigid, more defensive, more hostile toward each other. Sarah tries to prove her scientific credibility by volunteering additional information, submitting to extra procedures, demonstrating her value as a research subject. Victor increases his resistance efforts, providing false information, creating deliberate confusion, testing his captors' responses, looking for weaknesses in their security protocols. Subject 247 becomes more compliant, following every instruction, hoping that perfect behavior will protect her from the conflict between the other personalities. But their strategies work against each other. Sarah's cooperation provides information that Victor wants to protect. Victor's resistance threatens Subject 247's safety. Subject 247's compliance enables Sarah's exploitation. They're trapped in a cycle of conflict with no possible resolution. The physical environments continue to evolve, becoming more immersive, more detailed, more emotionally compelling. Sarah's laboratory includes views through windows, natural lighting, the sounds of city traffic, a complete urban research campus. Victor's facility shows signs of weather, seasonal changes, the passage of time, evidence of a larger institutional complex. Subject 247's clinic develops outdoor areas, garden views, the sounds of normal life continuing outside, a sense of connection to the broader community. Each environment feels like a complete world, with its own geography, its own social structures, its own rules and possibilities. Your body occasionally responds to the personality's different needs, reaching for research materials that don't exist, testing restraints that aren't there, adjusting medical equipment that's purely imaginary. The physical manifestations of three people trying to control one set of muscles, one nervous system, one body that belongs to all of them. Hour 4 brings the emergence of false memories, elaborate backstories that contradict each other, childhood experiences that can't all be real, relationships with people who exist in only one personality's history. The drug doesn't just fracture current consciousness. It creates separate personal histories, distinct life stories, individual narratives of growth and experience. Sarah remembers years of academic training, dissertation research, professional relationships, publications and conferences, a complete scientific career with its own emotional weight, its own sense of achievement, its own professional identity. Victor recalls military service, covert operations, classified missions, comrades lost in action, decorations for bravery, a lifetime of service to his country, with all the pride, guilt, loyalty, and trauma that such experiences would create. Subject 247 develops memories of previous medical experiences, successful treatments, caring healthcare providers, positive outcomes, a personal history of resilience, recovery, hope for the future. Each set of memories feels completely authentic, emotionally meaningful, personally defining. But these histories can't all belong to the same person. They contradict each other, overlap impossibly, create logical inconsistencies that the personalities can't resolve. The foundation of identity, the continuity of personal experience, becomes completely unreliable. Your brain has become a fiction generator, creating not just alternate realities, but alternate selves to inhabit them. Each personality is a complete human being, with depth, complexity, meaningful relationships, authentic emotions, genuine experiences, all sustained by nothing but altered brain chemistry. The false memories integrate seamlessly with real experiences, becoming indistinguishable from actual history. You can't tell which childhood events really happened, which relationships actually existed, which achievements were real. The line between authentic experience and drug-induced fantasy has disappeared completely. Each personality ages subjectively within their constructed reality. Sarah gains experience with research protocols, develops expertise in experimental procedures, builds professional relationships with her colleagues. Victor adapts to intelligence work. His survival instincts sharpen, his resistance techniques become more sophisticated. Subject 247 grows more comfortable with medical environments, learns to advocate for her own care, develops trust in healthcare providers, forms friendships with staff members. Months or years of character development, relationship building, skill acquisition, all happening in your brain over the course of hours. The personalities begin to pursue independent goals. Sarah wants to complete her research participation successfully, to contribute valuable data, to maintain scientific integrity. Victor plans to gather intelligence about his captors, to identify escape opportunities, to protect classified information. Subject 247 hopes to recover from her medical condition, to return to normal life, to use her experience to help other patients. Each goal makes perfect sense from that personality's perspective, but they conflict with each other, create impossible contradictions, demand mutually exclusive actions. Hour 5 introduces temporal distortions. The personalities experience time differently. Sarah feels like she's been participating in research for weeks, with detailed memories of daily routines, meals in the cafeteria, conversations with other volunteers. Victor believes he's been imprisoned for months, with memories of interrogation sessions, fellow prisoners, seasonal changes visible through his cell window. Subject 247 thinks she's been receiving treatment for an extended period, with gradual improvement, setbacks, and recoveries, relationships that have developed over time. But you've been sitting on your couch for only 5 hours. The drug has compressed subjective years into real-time hours or expanded minutes into subjective months. Your brain has created complete life experiences with their own pace, their own rhythms, their own sense of duration. Each personality has lived through extended periods of time, formed long-term relationships, experienced gradual change and growth, all within the accelerated time frame of chemical alteration. The constructed environments show signs of temporal passage. Sarah's research facility displays different seasons outside the windows, staff rotations, equipment updates, the natural evolution of an ongoing institution. Victor's prison shows weathering, maintenance cycles, changes in guard personnel, the institutional memory of a long-established facility. Subject 247's clinic demonstrates the continuity of ongoing healthcare, seasonal decorations, staff celebrations, the familiar rhythms of medical care. Each environment has its own history, its own sense of permanence, its own claim to authenticity. But time is elastic under the influence of multiple. Minutes stretch into hours, hours compress into seconds. The normal relationship between consciousness and duration has broken down completely. Your brain processes experience at variable speeds, creating the subjective sensation of living multiple lifetimes simultaneously. The personalities develop long-term relationships with their imaginary companions. Sarah forms a mentoring relationship with Dr. Martinez, who guides her through increasingly complex research procedures, shares scientific insights, becomes a trusted colleague and friend. Victor establishes a complex dynamic with Colonel Morrison, part adversary, part intellectual sparring partner. They engage in philosophical debates, test each other's resolve, develop a grudging mutual respect based on months of interaction. Subject 247 builds a supportive relationship with Nurse Patricia, who provides not just medical care but emotional support, personal encouragement, the kind of therapeutic relationship that develops over extended periods of trust and care. These relationships feel as real and meaningful as any human connection, complete with shared jokes, personal confidences, emotional support during difficult times, mutual concern for each other's well-being. The personalities invest emotionally in people who exist only in altered brain chemistry. Hour 6 brings increasing complexity to the internal conflicts. The personalities have developed sufficient history and relationship to engage in sophisticated psychological warfare. Sarah uses her scientific knowledge to analyze Victor's behavior, to predict his responses, to counter his resistance strategies. Victor employs intelligence techniques to manipulate Dr. Chin's emotional responses, to create doubt about her scientific objectivity, to undermine her confidence in the research protocols. Subject 247 attempts to mediate between them, to find compromises, to protect herself from their escalating conflict. But mediation is impossible when the fundamental goals are incompatible. Sarah needs Victor's cooperation to complete valid research. Victor needs to resist Sarah's scientific procedures to protect classified information. Subject 247 needs both personalities to remain calm to ensure her own safety. The internal war intensifies, each personality using increasingly sophisticated tactics. Sarah leverages her understanding of human psychology. Victor applies counterintelligence methods. Subject 247 employs patient advocacy skills. The shared consciousness becomes a battlefield where three complete human beings fight for control using every intellectual and emotional weapon at their disposal. Your body shows increasing signs of stress, elevated heart rate, perspiration, muscle tension, rapid breathing. The autonomic nervous system responds to the psychological conflict as if you're actually experiencing research procedures, hostile interrogation, and medical crisis simultaneously. But the most disturbing aspect is how natural it feels, how quickly the personalities adapted to their separate realities, how completely they accepted their distinct identities. The human brain's capacity for creating coherent narrative, meaningful relationships, purposeful existence, even under conditions of complete artificiality. Each personality has become fully human, with genuine emotions, authentic concerns, real relationships, meaningful goals. They laugh, cry, hope, fear, love, hate, experience the full range of human emotion, all while sharing the same neural substrate, the same brain tissue, the same biological foundation. Hour 7 introduces the beginning of what researchers call personality drift. The artificial boundaries between Sarah, Victor, and Subject 247 start to soften slightly. Not enough for them to recognize each other as the same person, but enough for deeper psychological contamination to occur. Sarah begins to dream Victor's dreams, experiences his nightmares about betraying his country, feels his deep loyalty to comrades she's never met, wakes up with emotions that don't match her experiences. She starts to question her own motivations, wondering if her scientific curiosity is really a form of collaboration, if her willingness to participate in research makes her complicit in something darker. Victor finds himself caring about Sarah's research goals, feeling protective of her innocence, worried about her safety in ways that contradict his training. He begins to see her not as an enemy operative, but as a naive scientist being manipulated by forces beyond her understanding. This compassion threatens his operational security, creates vulnerabilities he can't afford. Subject 247 absorbs emotional residue from both personalities: fear from Victor, guilt from Sarah, confusion from their ongoing conflict. She develops symptoms that don't match her medical condition: anxiety about things she doesn't understand, paranoia about people who've only been kind to her. The personality drift creates new forms of suffering: internal contradictions that can't be resolved, emotional responses that don't match circumstances, loyalty conflicts that have no logical solution. You begin to experience the psychological equivalent of being pulled apart by competing gravitational forces. Your brain struggles to maintain the separation while managing the increasing overlap. Sarah's research facility begins to show signs of security measures: guards, restricted access areas, elements that suggest something more complex than simple scientific research. Victor's prison starts to include educational components: libraries, research materials, intellectual stimulation that contradicts the hostile environment. Subject 247's medical clinic develops aspects of both: scientific equipment that could be used for research, security measures that suggest she's not entirely free to leave. The boundaries between the three environments become porous, allowing elements to bleed through, creating hybrid spaces that belong fully to none of the personalities. Hour 8 brings what underground chemists call cascade failure. The drug's ability to maintain rigid personality separation begins to break down. But instead of smooth reintegration, you experience chaotic overlap, conflicting memories, contradictory emotions, impossible situations. Sarah suddenly remembers being interrogated by Colonel Morrison, but the memory doesn't make sense with her research participation. Victor finds himself recalling medical procedures performed by Dr. Martinez, experiences that contradict his prison environment. Subject 247 develops detailed knowledge of both scientific protocols and intelligence operations, information she shouldn't possess. The overlapping memories don't integrate, they compete, creating internal contradictions that generate psychological distress. You remember trusting people and fearing them, cooperating with procedures and resisting them, feeling safe and threatened, all simultaneously, with equal emotional intensity. The personalities begin to suspect they're losing their sanity. Sarah can't explain her knowledge of military operations. Victor doesn't understand his concern for scientific accuracy. Subject 247 can't account for her expertise in areas she's never studied. Each assumes they're suffering from psychological breakdown, memory contamination, identity dissolution. But their explanations vary according to their worldview. Sarah believes the research has damaged her brain, created false memories, mixed up her personal experiences with experimental data. Victor assumes advanced interrogation techniques are breaking down his mental defenses, implanting false memories, destroying his psychological integrity. Subject 247 thinks her medical condition is affecting her cognitive function, creating delusions, mixing reality with hallucination. None of them consider the possibility that they might be the same person, that their separate realities might be drug-induced fantasies. The physical environments begin to collapse into each other. Sarah's laboratory shows prison cells. Victor's interrogation room includes medical equipment. Subject 247's clinic has research facilities and security checkpoints. The three worlds merge into impossible architecture, spaces that serve multiple contradictory purposes. Your body becomes more active, responding to different personalities' attempts to control movement, reaching for scientific instruments that transform into weapons that become medical devices, speaking to people who shift between doctor, interrogator, and nurse. The physical manifestations of three realities trying to occupy the same space. Hour 9 brings the most terrifying phase of the experience, complete boundary dissolution without successful integration. You become conscious of being three people simultaneously, aware of all three perspectives, all three sets of memories, all three emotional states, but unable to reconcile them into a coherent identity. You know you're Sarah Chun conducting research and Victor Kozlov resisting interrogation and Subject 247 receiving medical treatment. All at the same time. The contradictions don't resolve. They exist in parallel, creating a form of consciousness that has no equivalent in normal human experience. The personalities can now hear each other's thoughts directly, not as foreign voices, but as aspects of themselves. Sarah understands Victor's fear and loyalty. Victor recognizes Sarah's genuine scientific curiosity. Subject 247 sees both perspectives as parts of her own complex identity. But understanding doesn't eliminate conflict. It makes the conflict more painful, more personal, more impossible to resolve. You're fighting with yourself, contradicting your own beliefs, working against your own goals, experiencing internal war as literal self-destruction. The three sets of false memories exist simultaneously in your consciousness. You remember three different childhoods, three different educational experiences, three different professional careers, three different sets of relationships, all feeling equally real, equally yours, equally defining of who you are. Your brain has become a house divided against itself. Three complete personalities sharing one neural network. Three sets of goals competing for the same resources. Three worldviews trying to interpret the same sensory input. The result is cognitive chaos, psychological fragmentation, identity crisis elevated to the level of existential emergency. Hour 10 begins what chemists call aggressive reintegration. The drug's effects are weakening, but your brain can't simply snap back to normal consciousness. The three personalities resist merger, clinging to their separate identities, their independent relationships, their distinct purposes. Each personality experiences reintegration as death, the murder of everything they've become, the erasure of everyone they love, the destruction of all their achievements. Sarah doesn't want to lose Dr. Martinez, her research projects, her sense of scientific purpose. Victor can't bear the thought of abandoning Colonel Morrison, betraying his country, forgetting his duty to his fellow operatives. Subject 247 refuses to give up Nurse Patricia, her medical support system, her hope for recovery. But these relationships, achievements, purposes exist only in drug-altered consciousness. The people they love are chemical fantasies. The goals they pursue are neurological artifacts. The identities they defend are pharmaceutical constructions. The forced integration creates new forms of suffering. grief for losses that never happened, guilt about betrayals that don't exist, anger about injustices that occurred only in hallucination. You mourn for imaginary friends, feel responsible for fictional failures, carry emotional scars from experiences that happened only in your brain. Your body convulses as different personalities try to assert control, sometimes reaching for Dr. Martinez who isn't there, sometimes saluting Colonel Morrison who never existed, sometimes calling for Nurse Patricia who was always a chemical phantom. The physical manifestations of psychological disintegration. Hour 11 brings partial reintegration. You begin to recognize your apartment, your couch, your familiar surroundings, but they feel alien, foreign, like props in a stage play. Your own possessions seem to belong to someone else. Your reflection shows a face you don't quite recognize. The three personalities exist as layers in your consciousness. Sarah's scientific knowledge, Victor's survival instincts, Subject 247's medical experience, all accessible, but fragmented, disconnected from each other. You have skills you don't remember learning, knowledge you can't explain acquiring, emotional responses to situations you've never encountered. The false memories persist, but lose their emotional power. You remember Dr. Martinez, Colonel Morrison, Nurse Patricia, but they feel like characters from a movie you watched, people you knew in a dream, relationships that were meaningful but aren't real. Your sense of identity remains fractured, unreliable, constantly shifting. You're not sure which thoughts are originally yours, which emotions belong to your authentic self, which goals reflect your real desires. The foundation of personality has been revealed as arbitrary, constructed, temporary. Hour 12 begins the long process of psychological recovery. The drug's acute effects fade, but the experience leaves lasting changes. You understand consciousness differently, recognize the constructed nature of identity, see the arbitrary boundaries of the self. But you also carry the emotional weight of 3 lifetimes, relationships that felt real, achievements that seemed meaningful, losses that generated genuine grief. Your brain has been forced to process years of subjective experience in 12 hours, creating psychological fatigue that will take weeks to resolve. You sit on your couch, in your apartment, recognizing your environment, but feeling like a stranger in your own life. The person who took multiple 12 hours ago doesn't exist anymore, replaced by someone who remembers being 3 people, who lived 3 lives, who loved 3 different sets of people who never existed. The integration leaves you with expanded capabilities, but fractured certainty. Sarah's analytical skills, Victor's situational awareness, Subject 247's empathetic responses, all available, but you can't trust your own thoughts, can't rely on your own memories, can't assume your emotions belong to you. This is what multiple does to human consciousness. It doesn't just alter perception. It demolishes and reconstructs identity, creates experiences so vivid, so meaningful, so emotionally compelling, that returning to normal consciousness feels like a form of death. And this is just one drug, one experience, one glimpse into the underground pharmaceutical world that exists parallel to everything you think you know about human consciousness. There are hundreds of others, each with their own unique effects, their own specific methods of destroying and rebuilding the human mind. The weeks following a multiple experience bring what underground users call ghost syndrome. You go about your normal life, eating breakfast, going to work, having conversations, but part of your consciousness keeps expecting Dr. Martinez to call, keeps listening for updates from Colonel Morrison, keeps wondering how Nurse Patricia is doing. These people who never existed have left emotional residue in your brain, attachment patterns, social expectations, relationship dynamics that have nowhere to focus in reality. You find yourself starting to dial phone numbers that don't exist, checking email addresses that were never real, missing appointments that were never scheduled. Your coworkers notice changes, your family sees differences, friends comment that you seem different somehow. but you can't explain what's changed without sounding insane. How do you tell people you spent 12 hours being three different people, that you formed meaningful relationships with imaginary individuals, that part of you is still grieving for fictional friends? Sleep becomes complicated. Your dreams blend memories from all three personalities. You wake up confused about which experiences were real, which conversations actually happened, which relationships exist in your current reality. Sometimes you dream about Sarah's research, sometimes about Victor's missions, sometimes about Subject 247's medical treatments. The false memories fade slowly, inconsistently, unpredictably. Some days you remember Dr. Martinez clearly. Other days she seems like a distant fiction. The emotional attachments persist longer than the factual memories. You feel loyalty to people you can't clearly recall, miss relationships you can't quite remember. Your sense of identity remains fluid, unstable, context-dependent. At work, Sarah's analytical skills dominate, making you more methodical, more scientific in your approach to problems. In stressful situations, Victor's survival instincts take over, making you more suspicious, more strategic, more ready for conflict. When dealing with medical issues, Subject 247's patient perspective influences your responses, making you more compliant, more trusting of healthcare providers, more focused on recovery and healing. You've become a committee of personalities masquerading as one person. But multiple is considered a beginner drug in the underground pharmaceutical community, a simple introduction to consciousness alteration. The real veterans move on to compounds that make multiple look like children's aspirin, substances that don't just fracture identity. They rebuild it, reshape it, replace it entirely. There's a drug called rewrite that doesn't split your personality. It overwrites it. Users report becoming completely different people for extended periods, with new memories, new skills, new emotional patterns, new core beliefs. They live as someone else so completely that they forget their original identity exists. The effect can last for weeks, months, in some cases permanently. People have taken rewrite and emerged speaking different languages, practicing different religions, holding political beliefs that contradict their previous convictions, loving people they used to hate, hating people they used to love. The drug works by suppressing your existing neural patterns while amplifying dormant pathways, personality traits that were always present but never dominant, memories that were stored but never accessed, emotional responses that were possible but never expressed. It's like discovering that your brain contained multiple complete people, and the drug decides which one gets to be conscious. Maria Santos took rewrite at a party in Barcelona, expecting a mild hallucinogenic experience. Instead, she became Isabella Chun, a classical pianist from Singapore who spoke fluent Mandarin and had detailed memories of studying at the Royal Conservatory. For 3 months, Maria lived as Isabella, practicing piano 8 hours a day, speaking only Mandarin, calling her family in Singapore, people who didn't exist but whose phone numbers somehow worked. When the drug finally wore off, Maria discovered she had learned to play piano at a professional level, spoke Mandarin fluently, had formed relationships with people in the classical music community, had even signed a contract for a concert series. Isabella's skills, knowledge, and social connections had become permanently integrated into Maria's life. But Maria couldn't remember learning any of it, had no recollection of the practice sessions, the language study, the relationship building. She had lived someone else's life so completely that her own memories of that period were entirely fictional, created by Isabella's consciousness, experienced by Isabella's personality, belonging to someone who wasn't really Maria. The underground rewrite community consists of people who use the drug intentionally, deliberately becoming other people for extended periods. They call it life tourism, the opportunity to experience completely different forms of existence, different social classes, different cultural backgrounds, different sexual orientations, different emotional patterns. Some users maintain detailed journals of their alternate personalities, documenting the skills acquired, relationships formed, experiences accumulated during their time as someone else. They collect identities like souvenirs, becoming experts in fields they never studied, fluent in languages they never learned, emotionally attached to people they met while being someone else. But rewrite carries enormous risks. Some users never fully return to their original identity. They remain permanently changed, retaining elements of their alternate personality that conflict with their authentic self. Others become addicted to the escape, preferring their fabricated identities to their real lives, choosing to remain someone else permanently. The most tragic cases are the lost ones, people who took rewrite and emerged as someone so completely different that their original personality appears to be gone forever. They're functional, healthy, even happy, but they're not the same person who took the drug. Their families mourn them as if they died. Even though their body survived, their brain works. Their new personality thrives. David Kim took rewrite and became Marcus Rodriguez, a mechanic from Detroit with 3 children and a 20-year marriage. Marcus has detailed memories of his wedding, his children's births, decades of working on cars, relationships with neighbors, friends, extended family, a complete life history that feels absolutely real. But David Kim was a single software engineer from Portland who had never been married, never worked with his hands, never lived in Detroit. Marcus's memories contradict David's documented history, but Marcus experiences them as absolutely authentic, more real than David's fictional life as a programmer. David's family hired private investigators, consulted neurologists, tried experimental treatments, but Marcus has no interest in becoming David again. He's happier as Marcus, more fulfilled, more connected to his community, his wife, children, and friends. Even though they exist only in drug-induced memory, feel more real to him than David's documented relationships. This is the philosophical nightmare of rewrite. If someone becomes happier, more functional, more connected as their alternate personality, are they better off remaining someone else? Is Marcus Rodriguez, with his fictional but fulfilling life, more valuable than David Kim, with his authentic but isolated existence? The underground pharmaceutical community has developed even more extreme compounds, drugs that don't just change who you are, but change what you are, substances that alter your fundamental relationship to reality, your basic understanding of existence, your core assumptions about consciousness itself. There's a compound called species that temporarily rewires your brain to experience consciousness from non-human perspectives. Users report becoming birds, experiencing flight not as imagination but as authentic memory, feeling the wind beneath wings they don't possess, navigating by magnetic fields they can't normally sense. Others become predators, experiencing the world through heightened senses, feeling the hunting instinct, the territorial drive, the pack dynamics, the simple clarity of survival-focused consciousness. They move through human environments with animal awareness, noticing scents, sounds, movement patterns, threat assessments that their human brain normally ignores. Some users report becoming trees, experiencing time differently, feeling seasons as emotional states, sensing the chemical communications between plants, understanding forest ecosystems from the inside, developing patience and perspective that human consciousness can't normally achieve. The effects last for days, sometimes weeks. Users must be carefully monitored because their human body doesn't match their altered consciousness. People experiencing bird consciousness try to fly. Those with predator awareness become aggressive. Those with plant consciousness stop eating, drinking, moving, because trees don't need to actively seek resources. Sarah Wu took species expecting a mild nature experience. Instead, she became a wolf for 2 weeks. Her human apartment felt like a cage. Her job seemed meaningless. Her social relationships appeared weak and artificial compared to pack bonds. She stopped cooking food, eating only raw meat, sleeping on the floor, howling at sirens, marking territory. When species wore off, Sarah retained wolf sensory awareness. She could smell emotions on people, hear conversations from impossible distances, sense approaching weather changes, track movements through urban environments. But she also struggled with human social conventions, found small talk unbearable, developed claustrophobia in enclosed spaces, experienced profound loneliness without a pack. The underground species community includes people who've experienced consciousness as everything from dolphins to insects, mushrooms to bacteria. Each form of awareness leaves lasting changes, new sensory capabilities, different emotional patterns, altered relationships to time, space, social structures, mortality. Dr. James Fletcher, a psychiatrist who studied these underground communities for decades, documented over 300 different pharmaceutical compounds that alter consciousness in ways mainstream science considers impossible. Drugs that can transfer memories between people, substances that allow shared consciousness, compounds that enable time perception manipulation. He found chemicals that can induce synesthesia so intense that users experience reality as pure sensation, tasting colors, hearing textures, feeling sounds, seeing emotions. The world becomes a symphony of cross-sensory experience that makes normal perception seem flat, limited, artificially constrained. Other drugs create temporal displacement. Users experience their life history in random order. Childhood memories feel like recent events. Yesterday's experiences seem like distant history. They live in a state of temporal confusion where cause and effect relationships become meaningless, where past and future exist simultaneously in present awareness. The most disturbing compounds affect social consciousness, drugs that make users experience the emotions of everyone around them, feeling the collective mood of crowds, absorbing the anxiety, joy, anger, fear of entire groups. Users become emotional sponges, unable to distinguish their own feelings from others, experiencing the psychological state of their community as physical sensation. Dr. Fletcher documented a compound called collective that temporarily merges individual consciousness with group awareness. Users report becoming part of a hive mind, sharing thoughts, emotions, memories with everyone else under the drug's influence. They lose individual identity while gaining access to the combined knowledge and experience of the entire group. The effect creates temporary communities of shared consciousness, groups of people who think, feel, and remember together. They communicate without speaking, coordinate actions without planning, solve problems collectively without discussion. For the duration of the drug's effects, they exist as a single distributed entity rather than separate individuals. But when collective wears off, users experience profound isolation. The loss of shared consciousness feels like losing part of themselves, like being cut off from a larger organism. Many become addicted not to the euphoria, but to the connection, the sense of belonging to something greater than individual existence. The underground pharmaceutical world operates according to principles that contradict everything mainstream medicine believes about consciousness, brain function, the nature of human experience. These drugs suggest that identity, memory, perception, social bonding, temporal awareness, species consciousness are all much more fluid, more malleable, more artificial than we assume. Users report that after experiencing altered consciousness through these compounds, normal human awareness feels limited, constrained, artificially narrow, like living in a single room of a vast mansion, experiencing only a tiny fraction of possible ways of being conscious, being aware, being alive. But the price of expanded consciousness is the loss of stable identity, reliable memory, consistent personality, predictable emotional responses. Users trade psychological security for awareness, certainty for possibility, individual integrity for expanded experience. And this is still only the beginning, the shallow end of the underground pharmaceutical pool. The deeper levels involve compounds that most users never attempt. Substances so dangerous, so transformative, so fundamentally disruptive to human consciousness that even experienced psychonauts consider them too risky. You wake up in a concrete cell, your head pounding, your mouth dry as sandpaper. You don't remember how you got here, don't remember taking anything, don't even remember your own name. But you know something is very, very wrong. This is what it feels like to be on a drug called forget. And if you think memory loss means you just can't remember things, you're about to learn how terrifying it really is when your brain starts erasing you. Piece by piece, while you're still conscious. You're sitting on a metal bench, the kind they have in jail cells. Except this isn't a jail. This is worse. This is your own apartment, but your brain can't recognize it anymore. The drug has made your home feel like a prison. Your bed look like a torture device. Your kitchen seem like a laboratory. The walls are the same color they've always been, but they look wrong, threatening, like they're closing in on you. Your favorite chair, the one you've sat in thousands of times, looks like it belongs to a stranger. You can't remember buying it, can't remember sitting in it, can't remember it ever being yours. You try to think of your name, any name, but there's nothing, just empty space where your identity used to be. You know you're a person, you know you exist, but you don't know who you are, what you do, where you come from. It's like waking up as a ghost in someone else's life. The drug doesn't just make you forget things, it makes you forget how to remember. Your brain keeps trying to access memories that feel like they should be there, but every time you reach for them, they dissolve, like trying to hold water in your hands. You look in the mirror and see a face you don't recognize. You know it's your face, the one you've seen every day for your entire life, but it looks like a stranger. You try to remember what you looked like as a child, as a teenager, but there's nothing, just this unfamiliar face staring back at you. Your phone rings, and you answer it without thinking. A woman's voice says, "Hi, honey. How was your day?" She sounds happy, familiar, like she knows you well, but you have no idea who she is. You hang up, terrified, because someone who loves you has become a complete stranger. This is what forget does to your brain. It doesn't just erase memories. It erases the connections between memories, the threads that weave your experiences together into a coherent life story. You become a collection of isolated moments, floating in emptiness, with no past, no context, no sense of continuity. You find a wallet in your pocket, with credit cards and an ID that have your photo, but the name means nothing. The address could be anywhere. The face in the picture looks like someone you've never met. You're holding proof of your own identity, but it feels like evidence of someone else's life. The apartment is full of things that should be familiar, photos on the walls showing you with people you don't recognize, doing things you can't remember, smiling at cameras in places you've never been. Your entire life history laid out in pictures, but it all belongs to a stranger who happens to look exactly like you. You open drawers, looking for clues about who you are, but everything you find raises more questions. Clothes in your size that you don't remember buying, books with your name written inside that you've never read, medications prescribed to someone with your name for conditions you don't remember having. The refrigerator is full of food you don't remember buying, leftovers from meals you can't recall eating, expiration dates suggesting you've been living this life for months, years, but you feel like you just appeared in this apartment 5 minutes ago. Hour 2 brings a different kind of terror. You start to remember things, but not your things. You remember being in places you've never been, doing jobs you've never had, living with people you've never met. The drug isn't just erasing your real memories, it's creating false ones, filling the empty spaces with experiences that belong to someone else. You remember growing up in a house you've never seen, having parents whose faces are clear in your mind but who you've never met, going to schools you never attended, having friends whose names you know but who don't exist. The false memories feel completely real, more vivid than the real memories you can't access. You try to call the number on your emergency contact list, but when someone answers, they sound confused. They say they've never heard of you, have no idea why their number would be in your phone. You're calling people who should know you, but you're a complete stranger to them. The confusion gets worse when you realize some of the false memories contradict each other. You remember living in 3 different cities during the same time period, having 2 different jobs simultaneously, being married to people with different names. Your brain is creating multiple life stories, all equally convincing, all completely impossible. You try to go outside, thinking maybe seeing familiar places will trigger real memories. But the neighborhood looks alien, threatening, like a movie set designed to look normal, but getting all the details wrong. Streets you've walked down thousands of times feel like foreign territory. People on the street look at you strangely, like they recognize you but can't place where they know you from. You wave at a neighbor, and they wave back, but their expression shows confusion, like they're trying to remember how they know you, but can't quite figure it out. Hour 3 brings physical symptoms. Your body starts rejecting the false memories. Headaches, nausea, dizziness, like your brain is fighting against the artificial experiences, trying to restore its normal function, but the drug won't let it. You feel sick from being forced to remember things that never happened. You sit on your couch, or what you think is your couch, and try to piece together any fragment of real memory, anything that feels authentic. But every time you think you've found something real, it slips away, dissolves, gets replaced by another false experience. The woman calls again, the one who said, "Hi, honey." This time you stay on the phone, listening to her talk about shared experiences you can't remember, places you went together that you've never been, conversations you had that never happened. She's describing a relationship with someone who looks like you, but isn't you. You want to tell her what's happening, that you don't remember her, don't remember your life together, but the words won't come, because part of your brain insists that you do know her, that the memories are there, just temporarily blocked, that admitting you don't remember would be cruel, devastating. So you fake it, make non-committal sounds, agree with things you don't understand, participate in a conversation about a life you've never lived. It's like being an actor playing yourself, reading lines for a character who happens to have your name, your face, your voice. When you hang up, you realize how completely alone you are, surrounded by the evidence of a life you can't remember, in a place that should be home but feels like a museum, with people who love someone who looks like you but might as well be dead. Hour 4 brings the most disturbing realization. You start to understand that this isn't temporary. The drug hasn't just blocked your memories, it's destroyed them permanently. The person you used to be is gone, erased, replaced by this confused, terrified stranger who inherited their life, but none of their experiences. You look through photo albums, trying to force recognition, but the faces mean nothing. The places look foreign. The events documented could have happened to anyone. You're looking at the complete photographic history of someone else's life, someone who happened to live in your body, use your name, sleep in your bed. The false memories become more elaborate, more detailed, more emotionally compelling. You remember a childhood pet that never existed, a first love who was never real, a job you never had at a company that doesn't exist. The fabricated experiences are more vivid, more meaningful than any real memory you can access. You try to call in sick to whatever job you're supposed to have, but you don't know where you work, what you do, who your boss is. The business cards in your wallet show a company name that means nothing, a job title you don't understand, contact information for people who've never heard of you. Your computer is password protected, but you don't remember the password. Your own security questions are mysteries. Your mother's maiden name, your first pet's name, your childhood best friend, all information that should be automatic, but is completely inaccessible. Hour 5 brings acceptance of the horrifying truth. The person you were yesterday is dead. Their memories, personality, relationships, goals, fears, loves, all gone. You're a newborn consciousness in an adult body. inheriting a life you never lived, responsibilities you never accepted, relationships you never formed. The woman calls again, crying this time, saying she's worried about you, that you sound different, distant, like you're not yourself. She's right. You're not yourself. You're nobody. A blank slate wearing someone else's face, living in someone else's apartment, answering to someone else's name. You want to comfort her, but you don't know how. You don't know what she needs to hear, what memories you're supposed to share, what private jokes should make her laugh, what pet names you called each other. You're failing to be someone you never were, disappointing people you've never met. The false memories start to fade, leaving you with nothing, not even artificial experiences to fill the void. Just empty spaces where a lifetime of experiences should be. You become a person without a past, living in a present that makes no sense, facing a future you can't plan for because you don't know who you are. You sit in the darkness, in an apartment that might be yours, surrounded by things that might belong to you, waiting for memories that might never return, trying to figure out how to be a person when you don't remember learning how to have relationships when you don't remember loving, how to continue a life you never started. This is what forget does to human consciousness. It doesn't just alter your memory. It murders your identity, kills your personality, erases your humanity, leaving behind a biological machine that looks like you, sounds like you, but contains nothing of who you actually were. And this is considered one of the milder drugs in the underground pharmaceutical world. There are substances that make forget look like a harmless memory lapse. Compounds that don't just erase who you are, but replace you with something else entirely, something that was never human to begin with. Hour 6 brings visitors, people who have keys to your apartment, who walk in like they belong here, who hug you like they've known you forever. Your sister, apparently, with her husband and 2 kids. They're excited to see you, chattering about family plans, shared memories, inside jokes that mean nothing to you. The kids run to you, calling you uncle, jumping on your lap, showing you drawings they made for you. Their faces are bright with love, trust, familiarity, but you feel nothing. They're strangers, huge strangers, but strangers nonetheless. You smile and nod, but inside you're screaming because these children love someone who no longer exists. Your sister notices something's wrong, keeps asking if you're feeling okay, if something happened at work, if you're stressed about something. She knows you well enough to see the difference, but not well enough to imagine that the person she's talking to isn't her brother anymore. You try to play along, agreeing with stories about your childhood together, laughing at references you don't understand, participating in a family dynamic that feels like elaborate theater. Everyone else knows their lines, their roles, their relationships, but you're improvising badly. When they leave, your sister hugs you extra long, whispers that she loves you, that she's worried about you, that you should call if you need anything. The genuine care in her voice breaks something inside you, because you can't reciprocate, can't feel the decades of sibling love that should connect you. She's mourning a brother who's standing right in front of her, but is already dead. Hour 7 brings work colleagues, people who expect you to remember projects, deadlines, office politics, inside jokes, professional relationships built over years. They talk about presentations you supposedly gave, meetings you attended, decisions you made, contributions to work you can't recall doing. You sit in what they tell you is your office, at a desk covered with papers that mean nothing, computer files you can't access, photos of people you should know, awards for achievements you don't remember earning. Your professional identity has been completely erased, but everyone expects you to continue performing at the same level. Your boss stops by, friendly but concerned, mentions that you seem distracted lately, that your recent work has been inconsistent, that clients have been asking if everything's okay. You're failing at a job you don't remember having, disappointing people who trusted someone who no longer exists. You try to review your work, read through emails, check your calendar, but it's like reading about someone else's career, their problems, their successes, their relationships, their goals. You have the skills, the education, the experience, but no context, no continuity, no sense of purpose. Hour 8 brings the woman from the phone calls. She arrives with dinner, wine, flowers, clearly expecting a romantic evening with someone she loves deeply. Her face lights up when she sees you, but dims quickly when she realizes something's fundamentally wrong. She tries to recreate familiar routines, puts on music you supposedly love, but that sounds foreign. Cooks food she says is your favorite, but that you've never tasted. Talks about plans you made together for a future you can't imagine. Her efforts to connect with you become increasingly desperate, increasingly painful. You can see the confusion in her eyes, the fear, the growing realization that something terrible has happened to the person she loves. She asks direct questions about shared memories, special moments, private jokes, intimate details, and you have no answers, no recognition, no emotional response. When she starts crying, you want to comfort her, but you don't know how. You don't know what she needs, what usually helps, what words have meaning for her. You're watching someone grieve the loss of a relationship while the other person sits right there, physically present but emotionally absent. She leaves around midnight, promising to call tomorrow, hoping you'll feel better, suggesting you see a doctor, but you both know something has fundamentally changed. The person she came to see doesn't live here anymore, replaced by a stranger wearing their face. Hour 9 brings the night terrors. You try to sleep in a bed that should be familiar, surrounded by possessions that should bring comfort, but everything feels alien, threatening, wrong. You close your eyes and see fragments of false memories, pieces of lives you never lived, faces of people who never existed. The false memories become nightmares. You're being chased by childhood bullies you never had, failing tests at schools you never attended, losing jobs you never worked, being abandoned by friends who were never real. The artificial experiences create genuine trauma, real emotional pain from fictional events. You wake up screaming, reaching for someone who isn't there, calling names you don't recognize. Your body remembers being comforted, but you can't recall who used to hold you, what words used to calm you, what routine used to help you sleep. The apartment feels like a haunted house, filled with the ghost of whoever used to live here. Their books still on the shelves, their clothes still in the closets, their photographs still on the walls, but they're gone, completely gone, leaving only you, a confused stranger, to figure out how to live in their world. Hour 10 brings the morning routine, except you don't know what your routine used to be. You stand in the shower, not remembering how hot you like the water, which shampoo you prefer, how long you usually stay in. Every simple decision becomes a mystery. Every habit has been erased. You open the closet, faced with clothes that fit your body, but not your identity. You don't know your style, your preferences, what's appropriate for your job, what makes you feel confident. You dress like you're putting on a costume, playing a character you've never studied. Breakfast is equally confusing. The refrigerator and cabinets are stocked with food, but you don't know what you like, what you're allergic to, what usually satisfies you. You eat random things, hoping to trigger some memory, some recognition, some connection to the person who chose these foods. Your phone buzzes with text messages, people making plans, asking questions, sharing jokes, expecting responses from someone who knows the context, the history, the relationships. You read conversations that reference shared experiences you can't remember, private jokes you don't understand, emotional connections you can't feel. Hour 11 brings the doctor's appointment. Your sister must have called, worried enough to schedule an emergency visit. The doctor asks about your medical history, medications you take, surgeries you've had, family health issues, allergies, all information that should be automatic but is completely inaccessible. Your medical records show a complete health history, but reading them is like learning about a stranger. You discover conditions you don't remember having, treatments you can't recall, medications you don't remember taking. Your own body has become foreign territory. The doctor runs tests, checks your reflexes, examines your eyes, measures your blood pressure. Everything appears normal, physically, but psychologically you're a disaster. The brain scans show normal activity, no damage, no abnormalities, just a perfectly healthy brain that can't access its own memories. When the doctor asks what happened, you try to explain, but how do you describe waking up as someone else, losing your entire identity overnight, becoming a stranger in your own life? The words sound insane, even to you. So you just say you're having memory problems, stress, maybe depression. Hour 12 brings the horrible understanding that this is permanent. The drug has done its work, erased the person you used to be, replaced them with this confused, isolated, terrified stranger. You're not getting better, not recovering, not slowly remembering. You're starting over, from nothing, with no guide, no map, no help. Your sister comes back with photo albums, home videos, anything that might trigger recognition. She shows you pictures of birthdays, vacations, family gatherings, graduations, weddings, a complete visual history of a life you supposedly lived, but the images might as well be from a stranger's photo collection. She plays videos of you laughing, talking, interacting with family, being yourself, whoever that was. You watch this person who looks exactly like you, sounds like you, moves like you, but who feels completely foreign, like watching an actor who was hired to play you in the movie of your life. The evidence is overwhelming, undeniable. You lived a full life, had relationships, made memories, achieved things, experienced joy and sorrow and love and loss, but none of it belongs to you anymore. You're the inheritor of someone else's existence, responsible for continuing a story you never started. This is what forget does to human consciousness. It doesn't just take away your memories, it takes away you. Everything that makes you a specific person, your personality, your relationships, your sense of continuity, your connection to your own life. You become a biological machine running someone else's software. And the cruelest part, everyone around you keeps expecting you to be someone you're not, to remember things you can't, to feel emotions you don't have, to continue relationships you never formed. You're constantly failing to be a person you never were, disappointing people who love someone who's already dead. But this is still just the beginning. Forget is considered a starter drug in the underground pharmaceutical world. There are compounds that make complete memory erasure look gentle, substances that don't just remove your past, they remove your ability to form new memories, to learn, to grow, to become anyone at all. There's a drug called Present that traps users in a single moment. They experience the same minute over and over, unable to form new memories, unable to learn from experience, unable to move forward in time. They become stuck, conscious but unable to accumulate experience, aware but unable to grow. Users of Present remain conscious, but they can't remember anything that happened more than 60 seconds ago. Every minute is their first minute. Every conversation is their first conversation. Every experience feels new because they can't remember having it before. They exist in perpetual now, with no past to reference, no future to anticipate. And that's not even the worst one. There's a compound called Never that doesn't just erase memory. It prevents the formation of identity altogether. Users become conscious without being anyone, aware without having a self. They experience sensations, emotions, thoughts, but these experiences don't belong to a person, don't accumulate into personality, don't create continuity. Never users become pure consciousness without identity, awareness without self, experience without experiencer. They're alive, conscious, responsive, but there's no they, no person having the experiences, no identity to which the awareness belongs. They become living proof that consciousness can exist without self, awareness without identity, experience without experiencer. But describing these effects is impossible, because the people who've experienced them can't remember them, can't integrate them, can't communicate about them. They return from these drug experiences with no memory of what happened, no sense of having been changed, no awareness that they've lost something fundamental. They're different, obviously different to everyone who knows them, but they don't know they're different, can't remember being different, can't compare their current state to their previous identity. They've been transformed, but have no awareness of the transformation, changed, but no memory of the change. This is the ultimate horror of these memory-erasing drugs. They don't just destroy who you are, they destroy your ability to know you've been destroyed. You lose yourself so completely that you can't even mourn the loss, can't remember what you've lost, can't grieve for who you used to be. And somewhere, right now, someone is taking one of these drugs. Someone is waking up tomorrow with no memory of today, no sense of who they were, no connection to their previous life, becoming a stranger to everyone who loves them, including themselves. The underground pharmaceutical world continues to develop new compounds, new ways to erase, alter, destroy human memory, human identity, human consciousness itself. Each drug more effective than the last, more complete in its destruction, more permanent in its effects. And the most terrifying part, some people choose this, voluntarily erase themselves, deliberately destroy their identity, intentionally become strangers to their own lives. They see memory as a burden, identity as a prison, consciousness as a trap they want to escape. They take these drugs knowing they'll forget taking them, knowing they'll wake up as someone else, knowing that everyone who loves them will be left grieving for a person who's standing right in front of them, but no longer exists. This is what happens when chemistry meets consciousness, when pharmacology challenges identity, when drugs discover that everything you think makes you you can be erased, altered, replaced, destroyed, rebuilt, with nothing more than the right combination of molecules. Sweet dreams. Hour 13 brings a new nightmare, because the effects of forget are starting to wear off, but instead of your real memories returning, something else is happening, something much worse. You're sitting in your apartment, still a stranger to your own life, when you feel a strange tingling in your brain, like static electricity behind your eyes. The empty spaces where your memories used to be are filling up, but not with your experiences, with someone else's. This is what it feels like when forget transitions into its second phase, a compound called yesterday. And you're about to discover that losing your memory was just the beginning. Now you're going to live your entire life backwards, experiencing every moment in reverse chronological order, watching your existence unravel from end to beginning. The first thing you remember is being 93 years old, lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by people you don't recognize but who are clearly family, grieving, holding your hand, saying goodbye. You feel the weakness in your ancient body, the struggle to breathe, the peace of approaching death, even though you're 28 and perfectly healthy. Then you're 92, slightly stronger, sitting in a wheelchair, being fed by a nurse, unable to speak clearly, frustrated by your failing body, confused by a world that's become alien to you. The memories are vivid, complete, emotionally devastating. You experience the full horror of advanced age, the loss of independence, the confusion of dementia, the loneliness of outliving everyone you love. But you're experiencing it all backwards, so instead of decline, you feel improvement. Instead of getting weaker, you seem to be getting stronger. Instead of losing abilities, you appear to be gaining them. The relief you feel as your fictional 91-year-old self becomes more mobile, more alert, more connected to the world. Hour 14 brings your 80s, and you're working backwards through retirement, watching yourself become more active, more social, more engaged with life. You remember, in reverse, the joy of grandchildren visiting, becoming less frequent, their voices becoming higher, their bodies becoming smaller, until they disappear entirely. You experience the backwards progression of aging, wrinkles smoothing, hair darkening, energy increasing, but it's terrifying because you know, somehow, that you're moving away from life, not toward it, that every day that feels like improvement is actually bringing you closer to non-existence. The memories aren't vague or dreamlike. They're absolutely real, complete with physical sensations, emotional responses, relationships, achievements, losses. You live through decades of fictional experience, feeling every moment, caring about people who never existed, grieving losses that never happened. Hour 15 takes you through your 70s, your 60s, your 50s, working backwards through a career you never had, a marriage you never experienced, children you never raised. You watch your fictional kids grow younger, smaller, less capable, until they become babies, then disappear into non-existence. The emotional weight is crushing. You experience the love of a parent, the pride in your children's achievements, the worry about their problems, the joy of their successes, all in reverse, watching them become less and less until they're gone. It feels like losing your children, but backwards, which is somehow worse than normal grief. Your fictional spouse becomes younger, more beautiful, more energetic. As you move backwards through your marriage, you experience the renewal of love, the resolution of old arguments, the healing of ancient wounds, but you know you're moving away from them, that eventually they'll become a stranger, then disappear entirely. Hour 16 brings your 40s, your 30s, your late 20s, and suddenly you're experiencing memories that might be real, events that could have happened, people who might actually exist, but you can't tell the difference. Can't separate authentic experience from pharmaceutical fiction. You remember yesterday, but experience from tomorrow's perspective. You recall conversations you had, but as if they happened years ago, decisions you made, but with the wisdom of age, mistakes you committed, but with decades of regret. Everything recent feels ancient. Everything current feels nostalgic. The drug has created a complete backwards life. 70 years of experience in reverse chronological order. Each memory detailed, meaningful, emotionally authentic. You've lived an entire fictional existence, loved people who never existed, achieved things that never happened, suffered losses that weren't real. But the emotions are genuine. The love feels authentic. The grief is devastating. The pride is meaningful. Your brain has created a complete emotional life, with all the depth and complexity of real experience, all the attachment and investment of genuine relationships. Hour 17 brings your 20s, your teens, your childhood, moving backwards through education, friendships, first loves, family dynamics. You experience growing younger, becoming less independent, less capable, less aware. It's the opposite of normal human development, watching yourself become more naive, more dependent, more limited. But there's also relief, freedom from adult responsibilities, return to innocence, escape from complex problems. You feel the backwards progression as liberation, the gradual removal of burden, the simplification of existence, even though you know you're moving toward non-existence. Your fictional parents become younger, more energetic, more involved in your life. They take increasing responsibility for your care, your decisions, your problems. You experience the backwards development of independence, becoming more reliant on others, more protected, more sheltered. Hour 18 takes you through early childhood, toddlerhood, infancy. The memories become simpler, more sensory, less cognitive. You experience the world as a young child would. Everything larger, more colorful, more magical, more immediate, but also more confusing, more dependent, more vulnerable. The backwards progression of consciousness is terrifying. You feel your mental abilities decreasing, your understanding becoming more limited, your awareness more narrow. You're becoming less intelligent, less capable, less human, moving toward a state of pure sensation without understanding. Hour 19 brings the final phase. You're moving backwards through infancy, toward birth, toward the moment before existence. You experience becoming smaller, weaker, more helpless, more dependent, until you're barely conscious, barely aware, barely existing. The last memory is the moment before birth. Complete darkness, warmth, safety, unconsciousness, and then nothing. You've experienced your entire backwards life, from death to birth, from complexity to simplicity, from independence to dependence, from existence to non-existence. But now you're stuck. Your brain has lived through 70 years of backwards experience, but you're still 28, still sitting in your apartment, still unable to access your real memories. The fictional life feels more real than your actual existence, more meaningful than your authentic experience. You know more about your imaginary life than your real one, care more about fictional relationships than actual ones, feel more connected to backwards experiences than forward reality. The drug has replaced your authentic identity with a more compelling fiction. Hour 20 brings the horrible realization that you prefer the backwards life. The fictional experience was richer, more meaningful, more emotionally satisfying than whatever reality you can't remember. You'd rather be the person who lived that backwards existence than whoever you actually are. But that life is over, experienced in reverse, completed, finished. You can't go back to it, can't live it forward, can't change it, can't extend it. You're left with the memory of a more satisfying existence that never happened, that you experienced once, backwards, and can never experience again. This is what yesterday does to human consciousness. It doesn't just erase your real life. It replaces it with a more compelling fiction, a backwards existence that feels more authentic than forward reality. You become someone who lived a better life, in reverse, and can never return to it. And this is still just scratching the surface. There are drugs that make yesterday look simple, compounds that don't just reverse your timeline, but split it, multiply it, fracture it into infinite parallel experiences, substances that let you live multiple timelines simultaneously, experiencing every possible version of your life at once. There's a drug called loop that traps you in temporal cycles. You live the same day over and over, but you remember each repetition. You wake up with knowledge of every previous loop, able to change your actions, but unable to move forward in time. Stuck repeating the same 24 hours, 4 weeks, months, sometimes years. Loop users become temporal prisoners, conscious of their repetition, aware of their entrapment, able to perfect their actions through repetition, but unable to progress, to grow, to experience anything new. They know exactly what will happen each day, can predict every conversation, anticipate every event, but can't escape the cycle. The experience drives people insane, not from confusion, but from boredom, from the crushing predictability of repeated existence, from living the same day so many times that every moment becomes meaningless. Every conversation loses significance. Every experience becomes hollow routine. Some loop users try to break the cycle through increasingly extreme actions. They commit crimes, hurt people, destroy relationships, desperate to create some variation, some unpredictability, some escape from the temporal prison. But the loop always resets. Consequences disappear. Damage undoes itself. Actions become meaningless because they can't create lasting change. Others use their infinite repetitions to perfect skills, learn languages, master instruments, accumulate knowledge. They become incredibly accomplished, but only within the confines of their repeated day. Their expertise exists in temporal isolation, meaningless outside the loop, useless in the real world they can never reach. The most tragic loop users are those who spend their repeated days trying to save someone, prevent an accident, stop a tragedy, change an outcome. They live through the same disaster hundreds of times, each repetition showing them exactly what goes wrong, but unable to prevent it. The loop forces them to witness failure repeatedly, to experience helplessness infinitely, to live with the knowledge that they could prevent tragedy but lack the power to escape repetition. Maria Gonzalez took Loop expecting a mild time distortion experience. Instead, she became trapped reliving her daughter's death in a car accident. The loop begins at 6 a.m. on the morning of the crash, ends at midnight after the funeral, resets back to 6 a.m. She's lived through this day over 3,000 times, trying everything to prevent the accident, but the timeline won't change, won't break, won't let her save her child. She knows exactly when to leave the house, which route to take, what words to say. She's tried every possible intervention, called the police, disabled the car, physically restrained her daughter. But the loop finds ways to restore the original timeline, creates new accidents, different routes, alternative disasters. Her daughter always dies. The funeral always happens. Maria always wakes up the next morning to live it again. The psychological torture is unimaginable. Watching your child die thousands of times. Experiencing grief that never heals because it never has time to process. Living with hope that gets crushed daily, but renewed each morning. Maria has lived through more repetitions of loss than any human should experience, but can't escape. Can't move forward, can't heal. Loop creates temporal hell. Consciousness trapped in repetition. Awareness forced to experience the same events infinitely. Memory accumulating pain without relief. Knowledge becoming curse rather than blessing. Users understand time differently. Experience duration as imprisonment. See forward progress as impossible luxury. But there's something worse than being trapped in one timeline. There's a drug called Branch that splits your consciousness across multiple parallel timelines simultaneously. You experience every possible version of your life at once, making different choices, living different outcomes, existing in multiple realities, all equally real, all equally you. Branch users report living dozens of lives simultaneously. In one timeline, you're married with children. In another, you're single and traveling. In a third, you're dead from an accident. In a fourth, you never took the drug. Each version feels completely authentic, completely real, completely yours. But you're conscious of all of them. Experiencing multiple realities, multiple identities, multiple sets of relationships, multiple careers, multiple fates, all happening simultaneously. Your consciousness becomes distributed across infinite possibilities, spread so thin that you exist everywhere and nowhere. The emotional impact is devastating. You love different people in different timelines, achieve different goals, suffer different losses, experience different joys. But all the emotions blend together. Love mixing with grief, success contaminated by failure, happiness polluted by tragedy. You can't maintain emotional stability when you're experiencing every possible emotional state simultaneously. Jake Morrison took Branch during a period of major life decisions, choosing between job offers, relationship options, life paths. Instead of making choices, he experienced all possible outcomes simultaneously. In one timeline, he took the corporate job and became wealthy but unhappy. In another, he became an artist and found fulfillment but struggled financially. In a third, he moved abroad and found adventure but lost touch with family. Every decision created new branches, new timelines, new versions of himself. He experienced marriage and divorce, parenthood and childlessness, success and failure, health and illness, love and loneliness, all at once. His consciousness became a tree of infinite branches, each representing a different life, all equally real, all equally his. The experience made normal decision-making impossible. How do you choose a path when you're experiencing all possible paths simultaneously? How do you commit to one future when you're living every future? How do you value anything when you know it's just one option among infinite alternatives? Jake emerged from Branch unable to make any decisions, paralyzed by awareness of infinite possibilities. Every choice seemed arbitrary when he knew all possible outcomes. He couldn't choose what to eat, where to live, who to love, because he was still experiencing all possible choices, living all possible lives. Branch reveals the arbitrary nature of identity, the randomness of life paths, the infinite possibilities that exist within every moment. But the knowledge is paralyzing, overwhelming, destructive to the illusion of choice that makes normal life possible. These temporal drugs, loop, branch, yesterday, show that time isn't the linear, predictable, forward-moving experience most people assume. Consciousness can be unstuck from normal temporal flow, scattered across multiple timelines, trapped in repetitive cycles, reversed in direction, manipulated in ways that destroy the foundation of human experience. Users emerge with permanently altered relationships to time, memory, choice, identity. They've experienced forms of temporal consciousness that normal humans can't imagine, live through time in ways that contradict everything we assume about existence, seen the fluid, malleable, artificial nature of temporal experience. But gaining this knowledge destroys their ability to live normal temporal lives. They can't experience linear time without awareness of alternatives, can't make choices without seeing infinite branches, can't move forward without remembering backwards, can't exist in the present without consciousness of all possible presents. Time becomes a prison rather than a medium. Consciousness becomes scattered rather than focused. Identity becomes multiple rather than singular. Experience becomes overwhelming rather than manageable. They've expanded their temporal awareness at the cost of their ability to exist normally within time. And this is still just the beginning of temporal manipulation. There are drugs that age your consciousness while leaving your body young. Compounds that let you experience someone else's timeline. Substances that trap you between moments, existing in the infinite pause between seconds, conscious but unable to move forward or backward in time. Hour 21 brings something new, something worse, as your brain starts producing its own compounds. The pharmaceutical chaos in your system has triggered your natural chemistry to create substances that shouldn't exist. Your brain is becoming a laboratory, generating drugs that no chemist has ever synthesized. This is what happens when you overload human consciousness with too many artificial compounds. Your neural pathways start cross-connecting, creating new chemical reactions, producing molecules that alter awareness in ways no one has ever documented. You become a walking pharmaceutical experiment, generating your own psychoactive substances. The first sign is synesthesia, but not normal synesthesia. You start tasting emotions, literally. Fear tastes like copper pennies. Love tastes like warm honey. Anger tastes like burning rubber. Every feeling in your mouth becomes a flavor. Every emotion creates a specific taste that floods your senses. But it gets worse. You start hearing colors, not just seeing sounds, but actually hearing the audio frequency of different wavelengths of light. Red sounds like a deep bass note. Blue sounds like a high-pitched whistle. Yellow sounds like static electricity. The visual world becomes an endless cacophony of noise that never stops. Then you begin feeling sounds, not just hearing them, but experiencing them as physical sensations on your skin. Music feels like massage. Conversations feel like gentle touching. Car horns feel like being slapped. Sirens feel like being stabbed. Every sound in the environment becomes a physical assault or caress. This is what happens when your brain starts creating its own version of a drug called synapse, a compound that cross-wires all your sensory processing, making you experience the world through completely scrambled senses. Everything you perceive gets processed through the wrong neural pathways, creating impossible sensory experiences. You try to watch television, but the colors are screaming at you. The voices feel like insects crawling on your skin. The music tastes like rotting meat. Your brain can't separate different types of sensory input. Everything blends together into overwhelming chaos. You have to close your eyes, cover your ears, try to minimize input. But even silence has texture. Darkness has flavor. Hour 22 introduces a new nightmare. Your brain starts producing its own version of magnify, a compound that amplifies one sense to superhuman levels while completely shutting down the others. But unlike the controlled pharmaceutical version, your brain keeps switching which sense gets amplified, randomly, violently, without warning. Suddenly your hearing becomes so acute you can hear conversations 3 blocks away, heartbeats of people in neighboring apartments, the electrical hum of power lines, the footsteps of insects walking across surfaces. The auditory world becomes overwhelming, painful. You can hear everything happening within a mile radius, but you can't see anything. Your vision has completely shut down. Then it switches. Your sight becomes impossibly sharp. You can see individual dust motes floating in the air, read text on signs miles away, count the hairs on people's arms, notice micro-expressions that reveal people's thoughts, but you've gone completely deaf. The world is silent while being visually overwhelming. Next, your sense of touch amplifies. You can feel the texture of air currents, the weight of clothing fiber by fiber, the pressure of footsteps in the apartment below, the vibration of every moving object within hundreds of feet. Your skin becomes so sensitive that wearing clothes feels like being wrapped in sandpaper, but you can't smell anything, can't taste anything. The constant switching between amplified senses creates a form of torture. You never know which perception will suddenly explode into hypersensitivity, which senses will shut down, how long each phase will last. You become afraid to experience anything, afraid to open your eyes, afraid to listen, afraid to touch, because any sensation might become unbearably intense. Hour 23 brings the emergence of mirror, your brain's homemade version of a drug that makes you take on the personality of whoever you're looking at. But since you're alone in your apartment, you start mirroring yourself, creating feedback loops of personality reflection that spiral into madness. You look in the bathroom mirror and immediately start mimicking your own reflection, but the reflection appears to be mimicking you back, creating an endless loop of behavioral copying. You move your hand. The reflection moves. You copy the reflection's movement, which copies your copying, which creates an infinite recursion of self-imitation. But it gets worse when you start copying emotional states you see in your own face. You notice worry in your expression, so you feel more worried, which increases the worried expression, which makes you feel even more worried. Anxiety builds on itself. Fear amplifies fear. Confusion multiplies confusion, until you're trapped in escalating emotional feedback loops. When you try to leave the bathroom, the personality mirroring continues with photographs. You see a picture of yourself smiling at a birthday party you can't remember, and immediately feel compelled to smile, to feel happy, to embody the personality you see in the photo. But since you can't remember the context, the happiness feels artificial, forced, wrong. You cycle through dozens of photos, each one forcing you to adopt a different personality, different emotional state, different way of being. You become the person in your graduation photo, serious and hopeful, then the person in your vacation pictures, relaxed and carefree, then the person in family photos, loving and connected. But none of these personalities feel authentic. They're all masks, costumes, performances of someone you can't remember being. Hour 24 introduces your brain's version of phantom, a compound that makes you feel body parts that don't exist. But your homemade version is unstable, unpredictable, creating phantom sensations that shift and change without warning. You start feeling a third arm growing from your back. You can move it, flex the fingers, feel it touching things, but when you look, there's nothing there. The phantom limb feels completely real, completely functional, completely present, but doesn't exist. You try to use it to pick up objects, but nothing happens, creating profound confusion about the boundaries of your own body. Then you feel extra legs, dozens of them, like a spider. You can feel yourself walking on multiple limbs, distributing weight across numerous feet, moving in ways that human bodies can't move. but your actual legs are still normal, still just two, still walking normally. The disconnect between phantom sensation and physical reality becomes overwhelming. Your face feels like it's expanding, growing additional eyes, extra mouths, multiple noses. You can feel yourself seeing from impossible angles, speaking with voices that don't exist, smelling with sensitivity that seems superhuman. But touching your face reveals normal features, normal sensations, normal anatomy. The phantom sensations become increasingly bizarre. You feel like you have wings, can sense air currents beneath feathers that don't exist, feel the muscle contractions of flight while sitting perfectly still. You experience the sensation of flying while remaining grounded, of soaring while trapped, of freedom while imprisoned in your apartment. Hour 25 brings the most disturbing development. Your brain starts producing its own version of collective, a drug that creates shared consciousness with other people. But since you're alone, your brain starts creating the other people, manufacturing entire personalities to share consciousness with. You become aware of Sarah, a woman who shares your thoughts, your memories, your sensations. She exists in your mind as a complete person, with her own opinions, preferences, emotional responses, ways of interpreting experience. You can have conversations with her, disagree with her, feel her reactions to shared experiences. Then Marcus appears, a man with different perspectives, different knowledge, different emotional patterns. He argues with Sarah, creates conflict, offers alternative interpretations of everything you experience. Your consciousness becomes crowded, overpopulated, a committee of people arguing about every decision, every perception, every thought. More personalities emerge. Elena, David, Jennifer, Michael, dozens of complete individuals sharing your awareness, each with distinct voices, different opinions, separate emotional responses to shared experiences. Your mind becomes a town meeting where everyone talks at once, where consensus is impossible, where every thought gets debated by multiple perspectives. But these aren't separate personalities like with multiple. These are other people, complete strangers, sharing your consciousness, experiencing your life from their own perspectives, offering commentary, criticism, advice, judgment. Your private thoughts become public discussions. Your personal experiences become group activities. The crowded consciousness becomes unbearable. You can't have a private thought, can't experience a moment alone, can't make a decision without committee input. Every sensation gets interpreted by multiple people. Every emotion gets analyzed from different perspectives. Every memory gets reviewed by strangers who judge your choices, your relationships, your entire life. Hour 26 introduces temporal chaos as your brain produces unstable versions of time-altering compounds. You start experiencing moments out of sequence, living through events that haven't happened yet, remembering conversations from tomorrow, feeling nostalgia for future experiences. You remember having breakfast tomorrow, the taste of coffee you haven't brewed yet, the texture of toast you haven't made, the satisfaction of hunger you haven't felt. The future memory feels completely real, more vivid than present experience, more detailed than actual events. Then you experience yesterday's dinner, but from next week's perspective. You remember it as a distant event, something that happened long ago, even though it was recent. The temporal displacement creates impossible relationships between events. Experiences feel ancient that just happened. Recent events feel like distant history. Your consciousness becomes unstuck in time, experiencing past, present, and future simultaneously, but in random order, without logical sequence, without causal relationships. You live through effects before causes, experience consequences before actions, feel regret for things you haven't done yet. The temporal chaos makes normal functioning impossible. You can't plan because you remember the future. Can't learn from experience because past and present are scrambled. Can't maintain relationships because you're responding to conversations that haven't happened yet. experiencing emotions about events that might never occur. Hour 27 brings the final cascade failure. All the pharmaceutical compounds in your system, both artificial and self-generated, start interacting, creating new combinations, novel effects, unpredictable reactions. Your brain becomes a chemical laboratory producing substances that have never existed, effects that have never been documented. You experience all the drugs simultaneously: personality fragmentation, memory erasure, temporal displacement, sensory chaos, phantom sensations, shared consciousness, backwards timeline, infinite loops, parallel realities, everything at once, overlapping, conflicting, amplifying each other. Your consciousness explodes into fragments, each piece experiencing different pharmaceutical effects. Part of you is Sarah Chun in the research facility. Part is the backwards aging person. Part is trapped in temporal loops. Part is sharing awareness with imaginary people. Part is experiencing impossible sensory combinations. The fragments can't integrate, can't communicate, can't coordinate. You become a collection of separate consciousness experiencing incompatible realities, held together by nothing except the same body, the same brain, the same dying neural pathways, trying to process impossible chemical combinations. This is what happens when human consciousness gets pushed beyond its limits. When pharmaceutical exploration goes too far, when brain chemistry becomes too complex, too artificial, too removed from normal human experience. The mind doesn't just break, it explodes, fragmenting into pieces that can never be reassembled. You sit in your apartment, or what might be your apartment, experiencing dozens of different realities, being multiple people, living through various timelines, sensing impossible combinations, sharing consciousness with imaginary individuals, remembering futures, forgetting presents, trapped in loops, scattered across branches. And the most terrifying part, you can't tell which experience is real, which personality is authentic, which timeline is actual, which sensations are accurate, which memories are genuine, which thoughts are your own. Reality has become completely unreliable. Identity has dissolved. Consciousness has scattered. Awareness has become chaos. This is the ultimate destination of pharmaceutical consciousness exploration. Not enlightenment, not expansion, not transcendence, but fragmentation, dissolution, chaos, madness. The complete destruction of everything that makes consciousness coherent, functional, human. You've become living proof that there are limits to how far human awareness can be pushed, that consciousness has boundaries, that identity requires stability, that sanity depends on predictable relationships between perception, memory, thought, and reality. But the knowledge comes too late. After the damage is permanent, after the fragments can't be reassembled, after consciousness has been scattered beyond repair. You understand the limits by exceeding them. Discover the boundaries by crossing them. Learn about human nature by ceasing to be human. And somewhere, in the underground pharmaceutical community, new users are beginning their own journey, taking their first consciousness-altering compounds, starting down the path that leads, inevitably, to the complete dissolution of everything they think they are, everyone they think they know, everything they think they understand about existence itself. Sweet dreams.